You're listening to Afternoons with Roxanne Flores. I was looking over this book that's titled Harnessing the Nine Hallmarks of Aging. And the topic is turning ourselves into little pharmaceutical factories. What does that mean? Little pharmaceutical factories. Joining me today is pharmacist Greg Macpherson. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. Now, tell us more about what do you mean when you say pharmaceutical factories?
Hi, Roxanne. Good morning from New Zealand. Our cells are little pharmaceutical factories. They make all the little molecules that our bodies need to operate. And where I'm coming from here is that this new technology associated with the vaccine, the mRNA vaccines, is actually an exciting new piece of technology which actually enables us to perhaps turn on some of that production of those molecules that our cells need, and do that just through an injection, which is quite a breakthrough.
Could you kind of elaborate a little bit on when you mean the technology, the mRNA technology, which was used to create the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine? Because I think so many people are a little bit worried that it's new and they kind of, sped up that process when in reality, the mRNA has been studied for years. Tell us more about that.
It has been for decades. So if you imagine your DNA, which is, everybody knows is the sort of the molecule that codes our cells and makes us who we are. Well, it's a really vibrant molecule. And what happens is if our body needs a certain molecule, it might be some estrogen or some testosterone, our DNA actually can open up and shares the code. And this little thing called an mRNA comes in and reads the code and then takes it over to our protein manufacturing machinery in our cell, so to speak. So what we're really doing here is actually cutting out the DNA part and just making that mRNA available for our cells so that it can then make what it needs.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to turning our cells into little pharmaceutical factories, how do people feel as they get older?
Yeah, look, it's you mean as in how they feel in their body or how the aging process?
I guess both, or what your expertise is on.
Yeah, certainly. So, my focus is very much on aging and what happens to our body as we age. And so our DNA doesn't work quite as well as we get a wee bit older for whatever reason. When we're young, we have amazing DNA repair mechanisms. Like our DNA actually breaks up to 100,000 times a day per cell, which is quite a phenomenal number. But because of that, we have amazing repair mechanisms in our cells that just look after and care and maintain your DNA. But mistakes still happen and they don't always get all of the problems. So we just accumulate damage with our DNA as we age. And that actually has an effect on the ability for that mRNA to come in and read it and then go off and produce the proteins that our body needs.
It's funny because I recently turned 30 and I felt, I feel like if I did when I was 21 years old, woohoo! And then as I was approaching 30, my knees started to pop when I was squatting to pick something up. Certain parts of my back started to hurt that never used to hurt before. And I just thought, okay, all right. So what's going on here? I'm starting to feel a little bit older now.
Totally. You're just describing the aging process. And that's something, you experience at 40, 50, 60, things just don't quite work as well. And it is really a function of this molecule called DNA and its effect. And there's a few other factors as well that I discuss in the book, Harnessing the Nine Hallmarks of Aging, because scientists are getting really under the hood and understanding how our cells are aging. And that's quite exciting because what that means is that we're starting to understand there are perhaps different targets that we can focus on to slow the aging process down. So that's what the book is essentially all about.
Joining me on News Talk 710 KURV is Greg Macpherson. He's a pharmacist, also an author. The name of his book is called Harnessing the Nine Hallmarks of Aging. And the topic is just how to turn our cells into little pharmaceutical factories. You bring up right now how you focus on reversing the aging process. How do you do that?
It's really a lifelong strategy, Roxanne. I mean, it's really important to do things like exercise and eat well because that actually turns on genes that support healthy aging. But what's exciting, I think, and that is quite new and that hasn't been available to previous generations is we're starting to, have access to molecules that can really have a positive effect on our cells. So there's a really exciting molecule called hobamine, which probably no one's heard of because it's quite new, but it basically is a way for us to protect our DNA from oxidative stress, and does it in a way that hasn't been able to be done before. And the research is just coming through very quickly on how exciting this molecule is.
It's insane how you bring up eating well and exercising. That just really seems to be the answer to so many things. I guess, can you elaborate a little bit on that as to why exercising and eating right really will help, I guess, you when it comes to aging?
Yeah, Roxanne, well, let's take you on a journey back 100,000 years ago when we were living in a slightly different environment, and we were probably working quite hard for our food. We probably exercised every day, chasing that food, going and finding it, foraging it, preparing it. So our biology is wired to move. And the other thing that it's wired for is not so much sugar. Like, again, back 100,000 years ago, sugar was pretty hard to come by. And so we've got this Western diet and Western lifestyle where we're not moving as much as we should, and we're eating too much sugar, and literally our biology is sitting there screaming quietly at us going, help. And this is why perhaps we're getting some of the perhaps the diseases of older age a little earlier these days.
Mm-hmm. Now, besides eating well and exercising, what other tips could you give us when it comes to, I guess, reversing the aging process?
Yeah. So, like, one is just managing your stress, which is really important. And that doesn't mean don't have stress, because that's also important to us, but just managing it and making sure that we're coping well. And that actually has a physical effect on our cells and our DNA. You might have heard of these things called telomeres. They're the caps of our DNA, and they protect our DNA. If you're stressed but you manage it, then you can actually slow the shortening of those telomeres. But if you are stressed and not managing it well, that actually accelerates it, and that's not so good for our health.
Wow.
And then the other thing we've got is this fantastic molecule called NAD, which people can find, get supplements that can boost it. NAD is a special little enzyme that our body uses, but it depletes as we age and if we're overweight. And so boosting it up is like putting a decent lot of good fuel into our cells. And when our cells have plenty of energy, that just helps us keep the repair and maintenance process going.
Yeah.
And that has a good effect on our health as well.
I'm reading here that there's something called a chronological age. What's the difference between that and our birth age? See, I just said I turned 30 last month. What's the difference between that and my chronological age? What does that mean?
Congratulations. So we've got two ages, which is really interesting, and we've only really worked this out over the last 5 years or so. So our chronological age is your age, as you mentioned, is 30, and we tick that off every year as the years go by. But we've also got this thing called our biological age, and this reflects how old our cells are actually acting, and we can measure that now. So, you can be sitting there at 30 or 40 and have a biological age that could be either 10 years ahead or 10 years back, depending on a bit of luck, but also a bit of good management. So what's neat about your biological age is, even if you did your test, Roxanne, and it came out at 40, is that you can actually change it. So it's quite a plastic thing. So if you could end up taking some supplements that could help. You could get out and do a bit more exercise and adopt a healthier lifestyle and bring that biological age back. And, there are people out there that are 50 that have a biological age of 30. Wow. And these people are absolutely...
Because they're fit, they eat well, and they do all the things that you mentioned in your book.
You got it, yeah. And so when you do that, then what you're doing is you're actually taking control of that aging process, slowing it down. And these are the people that get to 80, 90, even 100, and they're ready to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. These are people smashing it.
I have seen ladies in their maybe 80s probably lifting more than I can. And that's that my husband is a personal trainer. But anyway, we're almost out of time, Mr. Macpherson. So before we go, tell us more about your book, Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging, and where we can find it.
Absolutely. So what I've done, Roxanne, is I've looked to really synthesize all of the latest knowledge around what we know about aging in the cell. And so really what I'm doing is taking the reader through that in a really easy to understand way, so that and then providing you with a roadmap of exactly what you should do just to live your healthiest life. You can get it at harnessing the 9hallmarksofaging.com. So pop over there, or I've got a Twitter handle, which is Greg Macpherson. It'd be great for people to pop over there, and we'll start to share what the book was all about.
All right. And thank you so much for joining me all the way from New Zealand. That is so amazing. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy morning to talk to me today. That is Greg Macpherson, a pharmacist and the author of Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging, my guest on News Talk 710 KURV.